everyone to ISSA Denver's virtual chapter meeting. Our topic today will be Secure Access Service Edge Framework. Our speaker will be Pam Kubiatowski. But before we dive in, just a couple of little housekeeping things. Would like to give a shout out to our chapter sponsors, Proofpoint, Zscalar, Logarithm, and Optiv. It's been an interesting time, as we're well aware, and I do appreciate our sponsors helping us out here. We're also looking for a handful of volunteers. If you're interested in serving the wider community, just log on to https:/denverissa.org and all the information will be there. For this meeting, all of the questions and whatnot are going to be over the ISSA Denver Slack channel. For those of you that aren't there, just go to Slack, search for Colorado Equals Security, and join the channel ISSA_Denver. Type in whatever questions you have, and I will interrupt the speaker, and then we'll go with it from there. So with that, just a brief little background on our speaker here. She is the Senior Director of Transformational Security at Zscalar, and her current focus is helping customers recognize and achieve their transformational move to, I'm going to guess it's pronounced SASE. Let's see, she's got over 25 years of experience, has done all sorts of impressive things, managing large, multifaceted global IT organizations. Before Zscalar, she was the Director of Global Network Services at Abbott Labs and led a network transformation program there. And with that, basically her discussion today will be talking about exactly what SaaS or SASE is. So with that, I turn it over to Pamela.
Great, thanks, Greg, and thanks everybody for having me. This is really a great honor to be here speaking to you today. Wish we were all in person, but as all of you probably are, I'm here in my home office. I actually have gotten kind of used to being in my home office, so it's kind of nice, quite frankly. So did want to talk to you about SASE. Greg, you were right. That's how you actually pronounce it. Gartner actually deemed Secure Access Service Edge terminology in 2019. So it's really a newer definition. It's a newer philosophy. However, a lot of us have been thinking about something similar to SASE for a very long time. When digital transformation began for a lot of companies, numbers of years ago, really for us in my former employment, it actually started with moving to Office 365. It was that move to SaaS-based solutions. And in moving to SaaS-based solutions, something had to change, right? Something very dramatically had to change from how things were being done. And that's where in 2019, Gartner stepped in and tried to put more framework in and be able to define what were we all really doing. And so with that, Gartner does go ahead and define it. I'm not going to read that to you, but basically it's combining WAN and network security functions together. Oops, sorry everybody, something's happening here. You gotta love technology, right? But basically it's taking those capabilities with WAN, SD-WAN, and we're still having issues here presentation-wise, and tying that all together. Because ultimately, we need to go ahead and figure out how to get that security function closer to the end user. I do apologize, something keeps slipping here with slides, so we may have to be going back and forth. Apologize for that. But basically, when they decided that the SASE framework is what we are going to structure this transformation around, it really is talking about converging the network security, the WAN services, all of that, into putting it close as possible, that framework, to the end user. Because quite frankly, your users, and really demonstrated now, your end users, you don't know where they're going to be. It's all, that whole castle and moat scenario we used to have in the past started evolving and started changing. And we had to rethink how we actually enabled the business. And when you look at SASE, it's talking about how do you really go ahead and identify sensitive data, malware, The ability to decrypt content at line speed with continuous monitoring of sessions for risk and trust levels. That's what really SASE is all about. Taking all those various services of how you would secure your edge when you had a castle and moat and put that as close as you could to the actual end user. When you actually had the castle and moat, right, you had these massive security stacks in your data center. You would go ahead and all your remote users, your remote facilities, your locations, your manufacturing facilities, they'd all go ahead and backhaul, typically over traditional MPLS circuits, right, to a data center where they went, you go ahead and you go through your security stack. And then from the security stack, you then, whether you were staying internal or you were going external, you'd be then sent to wherever your end destination was, whether internal again, or is it externally. But that didn't meet the needs of the business any longer. When you started transforming, you started moving to SaaS-based solutions, because the SaaS-based solutions were no longer sitting in your data centers, because in some situations, you also started moving your applications out. Not only were you buying applications, you were actually moving your internal apps out to hosted facilities. This architecture had to change. All of the backhauling and all of the latency to backhaul and then send your users out to a solution that was no longer on your premise created a really bad experience. When you look at this all, and again, this transformation that so many started a number of years ago with, really, for us, it was Office 365. The cloud really is the new data center. You don't know where your apps are being moved out of your actual premise to the cloud. Backhauling is not going to work any longer, because why are you going to backhaul to something that's no longer sitting on your premise or within your data centers? When you start to look at what that really means, when you're still using that full backhaul of an MPLS network or having your users VPN in for everything, VPN always on, why would you want that experience of going to your data center, going through your security stack, and then going back out to wherever your actual application was sitting and where that end user wanted to get to? Doesn't make sense. It sure doesn't go ahead and isn't cost efficient or effective, and it's a poor user experience. The natural path really is direct to the cloud. And how do you get your end users directly to where the app is sitting? It's all about creating that ubiquitous connectivity to wherever, for an end user, wherever that application is sitting, to get them there. You also, though, want to go ahead and make sure that you've reduced and you've verified that you don't have a security risk, that you've gone ahead and put all those zero trust network access in place. You have a secure web gateway. You have your firewalls as a SaaS. It's no longer the security stack, but how did you transition that to be a cloud-based service offering? When you look at Gartner again, and this is this whole development and this transition, Gartner states that the center of the universe and the network is about security. It's about the architecture. It's in your data center. It's obsolete. No longer do your things sit in your data center. So why do you want to go ahead and keep going back to that data center? The needs of the digital business, you need to enable your business. The digital transformation is here, and it's even more relevant now that we're in this circumstance now that we are, with so many of us working from home, working remotely, no longer in our facilities. When you look at this, where are your users? You have technologies enabling digital transformation. You have the cloud, right? You have agility, you have scale, you have mobility, you have people working. Your users are not in a facility most of the time any longer. And who knows, quite frankly, what tomorrow brings. Where are they going to be? We're not quite sure for some of us, right? Some businesses are deciding what that still is. IoT, you have to have operational efficiencies. You have to simplify environments. You have to figure out how to be more agile and you have the scale to be quickly able to go ahead and meet the business needs. And then, quite frankly, why would you want to go ahead and pay for all that MPLS, those MPLS circuits? Sorry, carriers. When you can go ahead and switch those MPLS circuits out to internet-based circuits, you can go ahead and reduce your costs with the MPLS backhaul and get your users out, if they are on-premise, direct to whatever destination they're trying to get to. How do you really do this, though? Because quite frankly, the new world, everything has been moved out of premise. Well, not everything. A large portion of your apps, your resources are being moved out. How do you secure this, though? It's all about the zero trust exchange. And when you compare the old world to the new world really does bring that simplification, that agility, that scalability. All those things come with being able to go ahead and move where the data center is no longer the prime focus on. You're moving cloud as the new data center. The internet is the new network. Direct access to where you need to get to. Business policies connect apps, devices, and users. And users connect to an app, not the network. Why go ahead and continue to use VPNs and connect to an actual network when you can actually have app segmentation? You can focus on getting direct to an app that's required, as opposed to why, as a user, do I get to everything? It's all about also building and experiencing the on-premise experience as off-premise. When users go home, in the old castle and moat world, when a user goes home, they have to sit back and think, okay, now where am I going to? Oh, okay, where is that app at? Oh yeah, I got a VPN in. Oh no, I always have to VPN, and I forgot they turn always on VPN in. It's all about a user having ubiquitous connectivity. When you look at the SASE model, it's creating a ubiquitous connectivity for your end users, irrelevant of where they are. They shouldn't have to think about where the app is sitting. They shouldn't have to think about, do I VPN in? They should all just be able to go ahead and click on an app just like they do when they're in the office. When you're in the office, you don't go through all kinds of steps to decide where an application sits. You just click on it and you get there. In the background, though, it's all of our responsibility to make sure that, irrelevant of where that end user is sitting, they do it securely. We are putting the right security controls in place. We are being able to put policies. We are being able to use CASB to see and to go ahead and apply those policies, those business policies, to what that actual end user is doing, and watch and make sure that the data is secure, irrelevant of where the data is sitting. So with that, a lot of us have been on many journeys with SASE. And again, some of us started journeys way before Gartner ever defined what SASE really is. When you look at the SASE structure, it really does, again, we're going to go ahead and it includes a secure web gateway. It includes CASB. It includes firewalls as a service. It's a zero trust network access. And quite frankly, with WAN, it's SD-WAN also included in that. It's those capabilities that will actually go ahead and secure the actual transaction, the end user's ability to get to whatever it is they're getting to, and not have to go through your data center and go through all those security stacks. In my former company, when we started our journey, it always starts with a business situation, an opportunity. And our opportunity came because we were going ahead and we were moving to SaaS-based solutions. As I referenced, we started moving to Office 365. And with Office 365, at a certain point, the amount of transactions that are going through your security stacks on premise, it becomes overwhelming from a network perspective. And you start to see the degradation of your hardware, and the end user experience starts to suffer. Quite frankly, when it starts to suffer, you have to do something, because it's only so long that an end user will sit there and wait and say, oh my gosh, there's this white circle of death. And we've all had the white circle of death. But with our journey, it was very much the castle and moat. It was a castle and moat journey where this was the traditional networks of the past. This is where everything sat on premise. This was the complete opposite of really what the SASE model was, or is, I should say. This is what it was, and that we needed to transition off of. But at the time, quite frankly, the networks of the past solved all the business situations we could come up with. We had internal applications. Everything was on premise. We had no reason to go off premise. We had reasons to get our users who were off premise on and into our network to get to the resources. But all of a sudden, that all started changing, right? And when that starts to change and we started moving to SaaS-based solutions, that's when we had to revisit this. Again, you're going to one or two SaaS-based solutions with a full backhaul network. It's not a big deal, right? Because it's more sporadic. But when you start to look at those really highly used, highly intensive applications, such as, and please don't take this wrong, Microsoft, but Office 365, there's a lot of transactions going back and forth constantly for every user. We had to revisit, we had to rethink. We needed to go ahead and sit back and think about, what are you trying to solve for? We had 4 key areas. Performance was a big thing. We had the end user performance, it wasn't acceptable. We were getting complaints and so forth. People said it was better if they went home to work. You know, why when they went home, was it easier to work, and could they get to things a lot quicker than when they had to get to resources within the network? Security. We knew we wanted to enhance our security posture. We wanted to be able to go ahead and create the same exact experience off-premise as on-premise. When you go off-premise, you know, when you're on-premise, you literally go into the office, you boot up, and you go to whatever it is that you want to go to. Same thing should happen at home. Now, one of the things, too, we wanted to do is we wanted to create additional policies. And this is where, again, SASE comes in. Previously in the old world, we weren't able to create policies when you were off-premise. And let me explain it this way. If I was on-premise and I was going to go out to something, let's just say it's a gaming site, and I wanted to go ahead, and it was my lunch hour. I'm going to go ahead and go to a gaming site. When I was on-premise, I couldn't go to those things. But if I went home, off-premise, I could. And there was nothing to stop me from going to that. That's where, again, the SASE model sets in, because we created the same exact experience off-premise because we were able to instill those policies off-premise. And when you went home, that's when it comes down to that zero trust, that network access. You shouldn't have to think about, going back to that whole SASE model, you shouldn't have to think about where you're going to. It should just be like you're sitting in the office, irrelevant of where you're sitting. You go to an app and you get to the app. And again, a lot of groups try to, as we did, look at network segmentation. Well, network segmentation is all about figuring out who goes where, right? And getting down to those port levels. When you look at zero trust network access in the SASE model, it's all about getting to the app that you have authority to get to and into, and access to only that. Because why, from a security perspective, would I give you access to everything if I can limit you only to those things that you should actually see? Not about getting into, but how do I limit you from seeing everything and only seeing that which you have the ability to get into? Financially, well, let's face it, I mean, quite frankly, every company wants to look for cost-saving measures. Everyone wants to cut costs and or figure out, how do I do more with less? So that's pretty standard. And then standardization. It's all about simplifying the environment. Many companies find themselves with acquisitions, or over time have gone ahead and maybe didn't have all of the funding required to keep the environment completely up to date. Or what you do is you find yourself prioritizing. I'm going to prioritize my security stack, right? And make sure that's up to date, because that's my most important. Well, guess what? When the users are not sitting in your office on your premise, and nor are your applications sitting in your data center, well, what good is that updating that security stack when it's not sitting there any longer? Simplification also reduces operating expenses, because when you simplify and you move more towards that SASE model, you'll find that if you can find the right provider to provide that solution for you, you're going to be able to get a lot of those functions within the same solution to give you a holistic view. Because one of the things that you also find in moving into this new world is the lack of visibility. You know, it was one thing to have visibility on premise and to see what was happening within your premise. But the minute you step out of your premise, what are the tools and what is the right mix in order to give you the visibility to know what's happening? Again, that goes back to the fact of being able to set policies, being able to go ahead and see what's happening based on those policies. So the visibility is key in all of this, because what you don't know will eventually hurt you. When you start to look at what that SASE is, and you start to look at how do you move toward that zero trust network access, it's all about going ahead and making that transition. It's not only a digital transformation, it's a network transformation at the same time. Because quite frankly, again, you're not securing something that's sitting on your premises 100% any longer. There are things that have moved off premise, your users, your applications, your data. And in doing so, our journey resulted in, quite frankly, the transition from MPLS to internet-based circuits. Yeah, there were still MPLS circuits for machine to machine at the time. Manufacturing systems needed to get back to data centers. So you still have that reduced requirement for MPLS. But when you look at your commercial facilities, you look at sites that previously had expensive MPLS circuits. Those were now switched out to broadband, dedicated internet circuits. That got you local breakout. With that local breakout, it actually gets the end user to the destination a lot quicker because it's going direct. Your end users no longer have to think about, hey, where my application sitting? Is it sitting in the data center? Is it moved to cloud hosted? Or is it a SaaS-based solution? They just click on it and they get to it. The security posture was enhanced. The cost was reduced. We simplified the environment. Our end user experience was enhanced. All those things were a benefit of moving to the zero trust, to the SASE framework. And we also had the visibility. Now, as companies keep advancing, and companies out there who are traditional hardware companies, a lot of them are touting and trying to figure out how did they get to the SASE model. One of the things that Gartner has stressed, and some of you may have read it already, is it's all about being able to be multi-tenant. It's multi-tenancy. It's a great analogy, but quite frankly, if I'm looking for a supplier of SASE, I don't want a bunch of hardware put together to create what this is in a patchwork. I want to look for a supplier and a partner that is built from the ground up, that is built based on cloud services. Because when you look at a multi-tenancy, that's where it has the agility and scalability. You want to look for a solution that has the presence where your facilities are located. You don't want to be backhauling to regional points, because otherwise that's just mimicking what you had in a data center for a multinational corporation. You want to look at a partner that's going to be able to scale based on the need and not go ahead and have massive outages, or, oh, sorry, this Saturday we have a 12-hour outage in this region of the world. Shouldn't happen that way. The SASE framework sets it up where it is transparent. It is flexible, agile, and quite frankly, becomes seamless in many aspects to your end users, wherever they're located. And with that, when it really does come down to a trusted network versus a zero trust network, your perimeter security is no longer required in a zero trust network. It's all about that any-to-any connectivity. And again, looking for a supplier and a partner that can provide that for you. A great analogy to leave you with in your thoughts is, would Netflix go ahead and just load thousands of DVD players on top in a gigantic room in order for, to provide the services? No, they built it from the ground up. It's a cloud solution, it's a cloud offering. It should be built from the ground up in order not to have the issues with scalability and simplicity and agility. So with that, I thank you so much. I think, Greg, do we have any questions out there?
Actually, I do have two questions for you here. I appreciate the conversation. It was very interesting. And thank you for your time there. One of the things that actually crossed my mind when the first couple of slides went by was the entire concept of IoT. How exactly does this tie into something where the level of scale isn't, say, a couple thousand machines for users, but maybe a couple million toothbrushes, as an example?
Mm-hmm. So, again, it goes back to that multi-tenancy and being able to scale very quickly. You don't know where your IoT devices are, right? They could be in a cluster somewhere. They could be dispersed globally. You need to be able to, if there's two ways to look at IoT. Internally in your company, if you're running IoT devices and having the ability to provide that bandwidth, right, for those devices, the additional bandwidth that may be required on top of everything else. The other is when you look at it and, to a lot of to some of the SASE providers, the ability to scale quickly based on where those IoT devices are going in, because quite frankly, those IoT devices, in some instances, are getting clustered. Maybe you have a state that is deployed, those IoT devices into the cars and so forth, right? And you see a large cluster in a specific area. You need that ability to quickly scale. It may be that it's dispersed over the globe and it's just like another user connecting. It's all about getting that connectivity from the IoT device to wherever its home base is for reporting and so forth, in a secured manner, and being able to apply the security, not necessarily at the actual device level, but within the path of that transaction, is again meeting in part of that SASE framework. Does that kind of answer your question?
It does, yes. Yeah. Excuse me. I appreciate the answer. That was, one of the things that I hear a lot about is issues with scaling to IoT devices. So yeah, I was curious about that. And then I guess the last question we have for right now, although I will say if anyone comes up with any questions in the, after this is over with, go ahead and put them in the ISSA_Denver channel, and we will get them over to Pam for her answers. But the last one, and this is sort of a generic question, to be honest. There was somebody that was pointing out the fact that zero trust architectures are really great if you can start from scratch, but if you have an existing system or a hybrid model, legacy backend stuff like that, implementing zero trust is frequently expensive, dangerous, risky, insert adjective here. So I was wondering if you might have any suggestions about how a let's see here, I guess I'll use the word heterogeneous company might go about implementing zero trust.
So, interesting comments. So we were a corporation that had a great deal of legacy. We'll call it that. Legacy applications. There were things that we knew that, again, focusing on needed to be standardized and so forth. What we did is, and I see a lot of companies in my new role now, is we see a lot of companies go ahead and identify what is the point that you start. Because quite frankly, just sitting back and saying, it's too dangerous or it's too iffy, is really not an answer that's going to enable your business for the future. What you need to do is you need to look at what is an area that you could start there. So for instance, VPN. I've seen a lot of companies recently go ahead and start with replacement of VPN because, number one, when the pandemic hit and the stay-at-home happened, quite frankly, companies found themselves unable to get hardware. They found themselves having to figure out how were they going to go ahead and expand their VPN environments. But this was expanding VPN environments to users in some instances where they did not have a knowledge of, and nor did they work at home previously. So now you're taking an individual who has network access via VPN. They're sitting at home. They also are not in a typical work at home environment. Let's face it. They're sitting around possibly a kitchen table with 2 or 3 of the kids from school because they weren't going to school. They're trying to do their homework. Mom or dad's trying to work. You also didn't have the scenario of, sitting in an office yelling over the cube saying, "Hey, Mary, did you get that email? Or is that okay? Or is that bad?" Right? You didn't have that water cooler where you could talk to others also. So a lot of companies went ahead and tried to expand what they currently had just to meet the business need. By doing that, it also created a poor experience for their end users because in some instances, they turned VPN on always so that this way they guaranteed the security. Some of them did split tunneling. A lot of companies talked about doing split tunneling. So focus on an area where you can start. Do you start there? Do you start with M&A activity, getting cross-company connectivity from disparate networks for users who have to go ahead and, you've just acquired a company, they need access, maybe HR, legal needs access to enterprise systems or vice versa. That's another opportunity. But quite frankly, where we started was we saw the need at the time for local breakout in our commercial facilities, any of our facilities where we had end users that needed to get to internet destinations. When we started there, that was easy because quite frankly, when you start to see the transition from MPLS circuits to internet circuits, you can create your tunnels to a solution, right, to a provider that supports SASE, or you could go ahead and create a VPN tunnel back to your data center if your users are going back to the data center. When you start there, then you start to see the possibilities of starting to get that good user experience. Also, you want to go ahead and find a provider that can meet what your business objectives are. If you sit back and you list out what your business objectives are, everyone has them. Everyone has something. What is the business trying to go ahead and achieve? Where does the business want to be? It's our job then from IT is to look at where the business wants to be and map out what does that mean to IT? What does that mean to our technology? Are we still good sitting the way we are? Because quite frankly, just saying it's too risky or it may be more unsecure, that isn't an answer that's going to enable the business. At times we need to go ahead and take calculated risks and start somewhere. So hopefully that kind of, but I think if you pick the right partner in a SASE model, they will help you model out what could your journey be. This is not a let's flip a switch and it's done. This is a journey for most companies because it's not about one thing that has to change. Multiple things have to change. There's depreciation cycles, right? There's the change of how do I change a end user from what they knew yesterday to how they do it tomorrow. There's a lot of different components that tie into this, but the right provider will help you and partner will help you figure that out and break it into viable chunks.
Great advice. Yeah, I like the concept of starting small and then moving out from there. And, frankly, even Google took years to get it right. So, if you're a much smaller company with a lot smaller resources, you're not going to get it done in 6 months.
But Greg, it's funny because one of the things and again, in this new role, it's a very interesting role I have, being able to have lived a journey and being able now to meet with others and talk about a journey and talk through some of the things that other companies want to achieve, right? And say, hey, well, I kind of looked at it this way and kind of took my journey this way. And when I do that, when you sit and you talk to people, everyone wants to do the right thing, but the appetite for risk is really where it all stops, right? And how much risk are you willing to accept for change? And when I think a lot of people have started small, they found that the risk that they thought they were embarking on really, in fact, wasn't what it was. It was much smaller a risk once they really started to embark on the change and start somewhere.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. So with that, I think we've hit the end of our questions. Once again, I want to thank you for the information and the presentation, and I look forward to seeing you all next month for our next meeting. Thank you very much.